That's really
Yeah.
the important person of the discussion today. So y'all know me. Walter, can you introduce yourself to some of my subscriber base and my
Yep.
community?
Yep. Well, hello, wonderful people. I'm Walter Rhein. I write both on Medium and on Substack. It kind of started because I wrote a letter to the editor. I've always been a writer, but I wrote a letter to the editor about 10 years ago because my wife is immigrant from Peru. And it was just kind of that started my I was always kind of aware. You have that awareness as a white person that there's problems in this country, but until you really are in that situation where you're more directly exposed to racism and you see how it's just and you really your awareness starts to grow then and you start to put aside all the delusions that are really kind of the problem in the United States, how people can kind of, well, that's not happening, that kind of thing. The more you see it directly when it's to the people you care about and your kids. And I grew up in
Hmm.
an area that, mainly just a rural city in northern Wisconsin, very conservative, not a lot of diversity in that population. So it was just one of those things where it's like, and this is something I constantly kind of struggle with, is that development, that awareness, that like the humanity of things versus the reality that's presented to you. So I guess maybe the easiest way to sum up is that's what my work is about: exploring this, how we can become better citizens of humanity, and disregard some of the awful things or overcome some of the awful things happening today.
Yeah.
See some nice comments.
And no, I'm glad. I'm glad you are in doing the space that you're doing, for the way that you're writing and where you're focusing your writing on, because it's like we were talking about in the right before the show, is it's breaking the mythos of rural America. And there's a
Yeah.
mythos that we've created in America around rural American society and how beautiful it is. To be totally honest, we have falsified a narrative that American society in rural areas is just beautiful and
Yeah.
quaint and nothing ever bad happens here. But
Yeah.
Walter's breaking through that. And he's writing from a real perspective. And I think it's really awesome because I also grew up in a really rural area and you can see that mythos breaking apart. Um, so can you tell me a little bit about some of the, because you break one of the things you break about the mythos is the idea of like purity equals pleasant or like positivity, like purity equals good. Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of like a purity based culture in rural America. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh gosh, yeah. What a great question. And it's just that it ties into so many things, and like just the myth of American exceptionalism, which I keep coming back to that, where that's essentially problematic because we use the word exceptional and everybody's like, oh, the United States, yeah, we're exceptional. We're conditioned to think that. But a synonym of exceptional is superior, right? And when you
Yes.
start talking about American superiority, it's like, no, it should the hairs on the back of your neck should start to raise up. It's like that is a problem. So it's a little bit scary how easily we say, oh, exceptional, not realizing that we're buying into that propaganda of superiority, which really just is the slippery slope right into authoritarianism. And
Yeah.
and it's really problematic in the United States because there's all these narratives that nobody pushes back against. And that's really the problem because I always say we have two right-wing political parties. We have no liberal representation. And they just kind of, the Democrats just kind of allow the messaging to be taken over where they start saying all of our problems are in the cities and the rural areas are perfect and pristine. They're all like Mayberry. And if you break down, if your car breaks down in a rural area, some 10 people come up and help you change a tire. But the
Hmm.
reality is those are places where really people are really struggling. And we overlook things like farm labor. I mean, children working on farms, that is child labor. And it is going on right now. And I knew kids that they'd come to school exhausted because they already did like 4 or 5 hours of work in the morning, hard work that a man should do. Little kids are doing it. They're operating machinery they shouldn't be operating. They're getting caught in power takeoffs. They're getting ripped up. And all this is just kind of sitting there. And we've got that myth that our rural areas are perfect, pristine, wonderful places. But the kids who live in those places, they see that that's not the case. And then they start feeling there's something wrong with them because their experience is not what this mythology of the United States is. And I think that helps explain a lot of the rage you're seeing in the United States, the willingness to vote for people that are, working to tear our country down, working to punish certain groups. There's all this anger, it's all misplaced. And a lot of it is just because we're not just pointing out the real problems that exist in our country. It's not like you hate the country. You say we need to correct this problem. Do better for our populations. I think, yeah. So it all ties into a lot of different things going on in the world today.
Yeah, it does. And that mythos, though, where we started from was mythos of purity leads us to what we're at now. And you made a really interesting point in the middle. And I'm hoping I don't misremember. I have fibro, so everything just goes out the window sometimes,
No, I know
and
the
then it
feeling.
all
Yeah,
comes back. But you were talking about one of the things I picked up early was that idea of like the broken tire or the pop tire, and people coming to help you.
yeah,
W-
yeah,
can you talk about that a little more? Because I grew up with that same idea too, where people are willing to just come help you, come get
yeah,
you, come pick you up. And yeah, there's a couple people out there who do. But
yeah,
if you notice, the same people that do that are the ones who moved out of that town at
yeah,
some
yeah.
point. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because like
Absolutely.
where truly the mythos, I think anyways, is on our side is we're the mythos of America. We represent that culture of fix your tire, help somebody out, because we're not going to take advantage of
Yeah,
you after we do the fact.
yeah,
Um, do you think it's a little bit of that selfish exceptionalism? That's what it was coming back to, was the American exceptionalism idea. Do you think it's all wrapped into that? And that's obviously where we got
yeah,
MAGA, but do you think it's wrapped into that? Um, and what are your thoughts on exceptionalism a little bit more?
yeah. Well, I think a lot of it comes into this patriarchal mindset. And what I found, I wrote an article about this recently, where when you're growing up, it's sort of like, again, when you're the farm kid, you have to work all these hours. But no matter how much you work, your work is never good enough. You're never working hard enough. Meanwhile, you're seeing your dad just kind of sit on his fat butt telling you to do work, right? And it's like and we're never supposed to question it. And it's a lot of what we see in politics today. Once the guy is the authoritarian father figure, if he seems like he does something wrong, we're supposed to just deny that because and we're force fed this idea that oh he's going to help you when times really get hard. But the other side of that is you have to keep making sacrifices every single day to help him because when the time comes for him to help you, then he'll be there. It's just this really bizarre thing. And so what I've discovered in my own life is you're working hard, it's never good enough. You're working hard, it's never good enough. You're making sacrifice, you're kind of waiting that, and you're happily doing it because you're like, well, down the road, this person will help me. But then down the road comes, you
They
get into
don't.
a position where you need help, and they're just, hey, you made bad decisions. They turn to you after after you had a lifetime of making sacrifices to help them, get them out of every jam. They turn around and blame you when something bad happens to you. And I think this is just the essence of what we're seeing in the United States. I mean, that authority, that patriarchal figure, that strong male leader BS, who they are exceptions to every rule that they think is important, but because they're in that position, that we're just never allowed to question it or even note it. So I think, and you mentioned exceptionalism again, I think that's part of it. Being exceptional is recognizing when you make a mistake and taking accountability for it. In real life, we don't have that. We have a nation that disregards all the crimes that we've committed. We're not even allowed to talk about it. We won't certainly offer any reparations for any of those crimes. We have a president who repeatedly makes mistakes. He gets caught. He'll say 7 lies in a conversation. He won't ever be held accountable for that because he's in that position of unquestionable authority. And this is
So
where the
let's go.
problem is.
So
Yeah.
cutting you off real quick, going into that of the unquestioned authority thing, because you've brought that up a couple times, but in a couple different examples too. And I think the biggest one we really need to talk about is the exceptional mythos of the father figure who doesn't do shit. Like that's not a dad. That's an asshole.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
just a
Yeah.
dude who wants control. So like what you were just saying there about it is dad sits on his ass and makes kids go to work and do shit all the time.
Yeah.
There's an important lesson in teaching chores and responsibility. But
Yeah.
teaching chores and responsibility also requires you, as the person who's telling them to do that, to also do those.
Lead by example. Yeah. And
Yeah.
because we always hear that. I mean, and it's farmers are one of the, the professions that are just revered. I mean, nobody teachers work so freaking hard, but we don't have that. Oh, we disrespect teachers as a nation, whereas farmers are
Yes.
basically untouchable. But growing up on a farm, I've seen both where I lived and in other households. What I saw was a bunch of kids doing all the work, and the father was just kind of sitting back. And he would withholding his love is what they do until because that's the carrot they dangle to make their kids just break their bodies working. And I guess it comes to the day those kids, the cycle just continues then because they don't get a rest until they have kids of their own, and then they're able to be the patriarch who abuses their own kids. And
Yes.
that's really the function. That's really how things work in our rural areas. And they reject education. I mean, the school I grew up in, we had a graduating class of 106 people, and we had there was, and it's always the case. I'm pro education. We had a handful of teachers who worked really hard and did the best they could, but you could see that they were just under intense community pressure, to censor certain things from their lesson plan if they were to. And so you'd get these teachers that would kind of convey things to you like on the sly. They wouldn't exactly, they'd acknowledge the existence of things like evolution without ever making a lesson on it. You know what I'm saying? So you're in this kind of
Hmm.
just and it's sort of like you look at the literature of history where poets have always had to kind of disguise their true meaning. They'll have a story, and then the allegorical meaning is the one you interpret because they know if they say it directly, they're going to just get murdered. And we kind
Yep.
of have that going on, like that social pressure. And so, I mean, just more. I keep saying what our effort needs to be in the United States, and this gets back to wider politics, where the Democratic Party they focus on their swing states, they focus on the big cities. It's like what you need to do is find those urban or those rural areas that are next to urban areas and expand out, have programs, we just gotta and they do need to reach out because as a liberal minded person living in a red area, it's hard. And
Oh, yeah.
I made it through, but it's like because I'm just essentially curious. But if everybody you meet is pressuring you to change your opinion, and I just basically hid what I thought for 25 years until you finally grow to the power where you're able to kind of explore those things, but it's kind of a loss, and we just need more representation. We need more boots on the ground of that liberal mindset in these rural red spaces.
Yeah, and so that's really good because I mean, you and I are both in a very red space. I'm in a fairly progressive red space because I'm in Northwest Arkansas. So Northwest Arkansas is one of those areas that's gerrymandered the shit out of it. So you cannot get
Yeah,
representation that means anything because we're that big, semi-big urban area in a red state that is trying to grow and is trying to encourage people to come in. It's the headquarters of Walmart. And yeah, Walmart kind of sucks at times, but they do offer a fairly diverse workforce. And they still guarantee, at least on the corporate side, a fairly diverse workforce, which encourages more people to come into Arkansas.
yeah,
But they just took all our safety nets away. And they thinking on the idea of like Democrats need to reach out. I'm in the area. I live in this area, and I actually reached out to my Democratic Party, which everybody should be doing. Everybody should reach out to your local Democratic Party. And if your local Democratic Party sucks, reach out to your county party. And if they suck, go make a better one. Like go to the meetings and make it a better one. Like I reached out to both. I signed up for the runforsomething.net website to learn. It's something that I keep telling everybody in the chat to go to because it is
yeah,
political, yeah, but it's the mythos of red America. It's not that we're red, it's not that areas are red, it's the areas are abandoned. Like
yes.
I
Second rule.
asked I asked our party rep, she's our county party rep, and she gave me the answer I was expecting, and she was so sad about it when she said it too. Was I asked, there's now a 57 state or whatever it is policy that the National Democratic Party is trying to institute because that includes all of the territories like
Mhm.
Guam and Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico and DC and things like that, where it's more than a 50 state strategy. And I was like, okay, well, where does that put us on the list in Arkansas? She was like, about where you'd expect at the bottom. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, great. So it's not really a 50 state strategy. It's just a swing state strategy masked as a 50 state strategy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, that's the problem right there. But we can
Yeah.
change that. And that rural
Yeah.
mythos is us now bringing it to our rural communities because we're the ones
Yeah.
who got away. At times, we're the ones who left, we're the ones who learned, but we're also
Yeah.
the ones who return to those communities because we love them. Those types of communities. We love being in rural areas. I love being in a rural area because, for the most part, people are incredibly friendly. Yes. But we need to bring out the truth of that
Yeah.
friendliness and not just a mask. Um,
I think there's a real opportunity though too, because I had a friend, and this was even like 5 years ago, and she was running for a small local office, and she ran as independent. And
yeah.
I'm thinking that that's just a really smart strategy for people because people they've been you don't understand people just don't understand. And I talk to a lot of it's interesting because I'll talk to liberal minded people who grew up in a blue state in a blue city, and they just can't comprehend the reality of our country. And like you and I, having a liberal mindset coming in a red rural area, we understand things that's just out of the wheelhouse of a lot of the people, at the levers of control. And they're just these rural areas are so indoctrinated against just the word Democrat, And that's what
Hmm.
the right is really good. I always say the left tries to win all of its messaging with critical reasoning and critical thinking. The right just uses rote memorization. Repeat, repeat, repeat. And it's like and the example I always use with people is it's like we've got the Democratic Party. It's like trying to through the act of speech, trying to make people forget how to ride a bicycle.
Yeah.
That which is learned through rote memorization, you have to overwrite it with more rote memorization. It's like a bad habit with with throwing a baseball. You have to override it by practicing the right way to throw the baseball. You can't you know, explain it to somebody, you can't lecture them into unlearning these rote memorized things. And so, like the idea, we're gonna run independent, it's like, and if you're fed up, like you were saying, you're fed up with your local Democratic, just say, hey, or if half the time nobody's even running for these seats.
Yeah,
So it's
just
just like, hey,
run.
I'm gonna provide an alternative. Yeah.
Yeah, just run. And if nobody's going to run for that seat and you know you're in an area where it's really red, like Walter just said, run independent because people, here's the thing is here, this is, I'm really glad we got into this part of it because it actually ties exactly into my haiku from this morning, which is called Purpose. And I'll read it here in a couple minutes because I love reading my poetry live. I've discovered it's really fun to do. I was so nervous to do it the first time. Um, but now I enjoy it. But it's the idea of bringing civics back into an area with purpose, and this is the fourth in the series of the Civic Haikus. And so it's foundations, um, actions, engagement, and purpose now. And those are four key words that I'm trying to use because it's all about building a foundation of civic understanding, actioning on that, engaging continually, and then doing it with purpose. And that's really what the Democrats aren't doing, but we can do as Americans. And then you can brand yourself as a Democrat later or as an
Yeah.
independent later. You don't have to come to an area and go, hey, I'm Democrat Nick Paro coming in and I want to
Yeah.
start a food bank for y'all because poor Republicans need
Yeah.
Democrats to come save them. And that's what they're going to see it as. They're going to see you as
Yeah.
with that
Yes.
savior bullshit mentality. And they're going to go, we
Yeah.
already have a savior. His name is Donald Trump
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
or Jesus. They replace the
Yeah.
two with each other. Um, so I'm going to read my haiku because it fits in a lot with what we're talking about, and then I want to go back to your notes and just expand more on some of your mythos and
Okay.
maybe talk about what you might have cooking up in the works for us too in the
Okay.
future. Because I know you and I've had a little bit of talks about what might be coming,
Yeah.
and it piqued my interest because I love books like that and things like that. So, but before we go any further, here's this morning's haiku: Purpose. Civics is purpose, rising to ward off the wolves, drive back howling dark.
Right.
And so, from a rural standpoint, think of ourselves, if we want to go back to the farmer
Yeah.
mythos and farmer mentality of America, there is a segment of farmers in America who live up to the idea of drive back howling wolves. They protect their people. They don't do the They don't enslave their
Yeah,
children into child labor. They don't
yeah,
encourage the enslavement of their children into child labor or the patriarchy of destruction. They encourage positive role models and positive masculinity. They don't use forced immigrant labor. Or if they do use labor from people who are, quote, illegal or non citizens, they do it the
yeah,
right way. They help them get green cards, they get work permits, they do the things to help and secure their farm to drive back the wolves of hate. And we need to plant our
yeah,
seeds locally. Um,
yeah. We've there's a lot too, just like the mythos, like you're talking about. It's just there's so many places, so many struggling farms I've seen where it's just their way of life is just not possible anymore, and it's already the case. They're living on subsidies, and I think it's some of this stuff is, like the corn crops, the subsidies you get, and it's to the point where they're pressuring these. I mean, we're gonna see just a it's gonna be awful in the next couple of years now that they've cut all this US aid and all that stuff. And it's just what I've often seen too is just that it's really hard. I mean, as it's really hard to go from a small rural area and get a college degree. When I sat down with a guidance counselor, they told me not to go. They're just like, "You're just gonna fail out because that's what everybody does from our town. It's just gonna." And he was trying to give you good advice where he was just saying, "You're just gonna take on a bunch of debt and it's gonna be bad for you." But there's like that it's because there is no path from that rural farm to, like, a higher education and a better life. They have that longing, so you occasionally you get that thing where it's like, every day of my life, everybody in my community was disparaging getting that degree, but then once I get it and I come back, you get a fair number of like, "Well, shit, good for you, man," you do get that. So it's like that's that undercurrent that's there if we can help more people go, like you're saying, and just the real problems though, because it's like that veneer where everything is great is what's covering up all the problems that we could easily solve, and everybody's frustrated by that.
yeah, and it's really a lot of the times too, it's simple problems that all we need to do is just listen to our neighbors and go, oh, I experienced that too. Like, I
Yeah,
have food insecurity, or
yeah,
I just want to go to work and be respected and treated like a normal person and just, yeah,
yeah,
everybody. I used to get bullied at work all the time. I'm a straight white dude. Well, I'm not
yeah.
a straight white dude. I'm a white dude. Um, I'm a straight enough white dude. And um, I'm like, and I'm happily married. It's like my wife and I we love our family and everything, but like I get bullied at work because
Yeah,
I'm slightly different. I
yeah,
say my opinion. And that's why so many of us left those small towns is because it's a bully culture. And a lot of those
yeah,
people now we're seeing, especially on the tech side, are those bullies coming back out of the woodwork.
yeah,
Um, and I
and
think
they've
it
never
comes back
addressed
to,
their yeah,
mhm. They've never addressed it. And the thing is, they've never been given a boundary that they couldn't
yeah,
break.
yeah, 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 that ties into a lot. Our dual tier justice system where it's almost like, yeah, there's some crimes that are totally acceptable for some groups of people, and then they try to entice people that aren't in those groups, and it's just the disparity of experience in the United States, and just the and that it's it just is astonishing, really, when you see the attacks on diversity that are happening, which is just sort of like, they want the conformity of thinking, and they only want to recognize one possible human existence, and it's just so it's upsetting. And yeah, I mean, we just need that counter argument because but I mean, going back as far as the build the wall slogan, which is a blatantly racist slogan, to say that is blatantly racist, and that's been normalized. Nobody pushed back on it for being racist the first time it came out. You can't even hardly get that conversation started with people, and just all those mechanisms that prevent us from having these conversations, like you're talking about. Yeah, and the trick is, like you said, you just go back and say, "Hey, I'd like my kids to be treated with dignity. I'd like them to have a chance at a better life." 100% of people will agree with you on that. But yeah, there's so much hostility that's built in, and it's all displaced from this frustration and this lack of a way out and just terror often for a lot of different reasons because people know that their way of life is going away. You can't. I was going to talk a little bit like the number of hours I spent shooting, like in preparation for hunting season. But I've met people in the military who have not spent as much time shooting guns as I have, and it's just like it's weird. And it's not necessarily a thing that I like, but it was always like go out to the gravel pit and shoot, shoot, shoot. And it's just that's just
Yeah.
I was thinking about that. I hadn't thought about it for a while, but it came up to my mind again the other day, and it's just a weird thing.
Yeah, it's funny you say that too, because I was in the army, and so I'm an army vet, and we did go to the gun range. We went to ranges. We went to the pistol range. We went to the long range for our M4s and qualifications. We went for different types of weapons. We went for 50 cals. We did the freaking the grenade launchers. Those are so cool, by the way. They're so fun to shoot some of those. My favorite one, and I'm just gonna, this is, I know it sounds ridiculous nowadays. My favorite one is the semi-automatic grenade launcher because all you have to do is just go, it just goes thump, thump, thump,
Sounds like
and you
Transformers.
just,
Yeah.
oh, it's so fun. It's like the big cannon on Ironside's
Yeah.
hand that shoots out the grenades all the in the big circle. That's exactly what it is. It's so much fun. But you're right. Most Americans outside of the military shoot more than they
Mhm.
you do in the military because you don't go all the time. We qualify monthly or
Yeah.
quarterly on certain weapons and then or annually on certain weapons, and that's really it in a lot of cases. But most of if you're handling your weapon, it's about training to use it correctly and not just
Yeah.
shooting bullets down the range. And I think
Yeah.
that's what most Americans, at least on the gun ownership side, don't do really well, is they don't understand, like,
Yeah.
they always talk about, oh, we want to have military grade weapons and these sort of things. Okay, then have military
Yeah.
grade training because you will soon find out that you are handling your weapon wrong, you're storing your weapon wrong, and you're teaching your children inappropriate habits that are leading to kids getting
Yeah.
shot in school.
And it's a weird thing, and it's another thing, like, I've been in other countries and it's like they have like this okay, so there's this little story. They had this like gun range thing said it was like it wasn't quite an arcade thing, but there was like a rifle and you had to shoot the targets. And I was in Australia and they were trying to do it and like none of them could hit any of the targets, they're trying their whole I'm just sitting there watching this and I'm just like, "Well, I can do it." And so I grabbed the gun, I was like, "Ping, ping, 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 ping," shot all the things, and they looked at me like scared all of a sudden, and I'm just like,
Hmm.
then it occurs to me, it's like, yeah, I mean, from when I was 5, you're little, and this is a family thing. We would all go out and just shoot, shoot, shoot. I mean, you'd be this row of little kids, and so yeah, there's a difference. I mean, if you're 18 and you're learning how to handle a gun, all that is important, so you don't, shoot yourself or somebody else accidentally. But then it's weird when it's like you're preparing little kids for the end of civilization type type thing. And and that's kinda like I've had a couple moments like that where it's like the amount of that was just and it's the indoctrination thing again, rote
Hmm.
memory, and I could still pick up a gun, and I had a friend who just had joined he'd been in the military, he just got a job as a federal officer, and he's like, "Hey, come to the gun range with me." He was trying out this new gun, and he was like he was shooting it, so he's like, "Well, you try it." He's like, "You're always better than me at everything you do, so here." So I took it, and I was like, "Bing, bing, bing," shot the 5 targets, and it's just like, it's not a skill I want, but it's not a skill that goes away either. So, yeah, I haven't
No.
held a gun in 15 years, but it's a little weird.
Yeah. I mean, I think the American mythos has some. I was reading it on a comment from one of the posts I put out uh, yesterday, and somebody commented back on it, and it was a really great comment about what was going on, and they ended it with a quote about how Jesus would respond. And I'm non-religious,
Yeah,
but they were like, Jesus would respond to this in the way of it's that quote he said to John, I think it was John or Peter, that was live by the sword, die by the sword. But
yeah,
what
yeah,
Jesus would say nowadays is live by the gun, die by the gun.
yeah,
And
uh,
that's sort of the American mythos of Jesus is or
yeah,
I guess fundamentalist Jesus is a white dude carrying guns and wrapped himself in a cross or
yeah,
wrapped himself in a flag, just like our founders told us they would do, is they would wrap themselves in the flag and thump the Bible, uh, and carry the
yeah,
cross to be more specific. And they're doing that.
And God is the unquestionable authority figure, which is the model for patriarchy, really, and just any form of authoritarianism. It's turned into that. I wrote recently. I'm going to have a guy on. I did my article about the prosperity gospel and how that is just they because everything in the Bible actually says we should, the poor people are the good ones. Don't be rich. Jesus says it again and again. And at some point along the way, somebody's like, well, we can't have this. And so they overwrote all the message of the Bible. And now most of the people that think that they are biblical scholars, they're teaching the prosperity gospel rather than any of the words that are actually in the Bible, which is you know,
Yeah,
the
isn't
perversion.
greed one of the seven deadly sins? Like,
It's
and
in there. Yeah.
I asked this question to Lisa J yesterday while we were on, because we do a talk on Tuesdays and Thursdays about dominionism and the Seven Mountain Mandates and how that's all tied into
Yeah.
all
You
of
mentioned that.
this
Yeah.
and all of these people because they're all part of a dominionist. It's all an apocalypse cult. Um,
Yeah.
what do you think about that?
Yeah.
Do you think
Well,
in terms of like the mythos built around like guns and the way that they teach kids,
yeah.
or the way that the patriarchy is formed around that mythical father figure? Do you think it's a bit of that do you think dominionism is linked in there?
I think there's a lot of it's just kind of this protoform that sits there that could be maliciously influenced in a lot of different ways. And so there's a lot of different nefarious forces that kind of come along. And that's the one thing we have to count on with evil is that evil eats its own. So sooner or later, I mean, they can't form a coalition. They're going to collapse on themselves. But I was even just the other day, I looked it up that there's which they made like the anti-Christian, declaration that this government stood for that. Like we have to report any anti-Christian bias or whatever. But it's like this whole immigration crackdown is anti-Christian bias because everybody coming up from the southern border is Roman Catholic. And my wife being from Peru, you'd see that. And it's a whole different, I never kind of had been exposed to that form of um, Catholic belief. It's a lot. They were actually willing to speak to me down there. I would have conversations with people and I'd say, hey, I have these conserves, and they'd actually think about it. And what we have in the United States is Protestant, majority is Protestant. So I think we're in the middle of a religious war as much as, and there's also ethnic cleansing going on. I think different groups who are pulling the levers of control right now have different motivations. So, I mean, what you're saying definitely feeds into it. Yeah, but it's really upsetting that nobody is talking about how they're rounding up Roman Catholics. I mean, that could easily get in the media too, and we could have some pushback that way. We've
Hmm.
seen the new pope push back against this regime a couple of times. I always have my issues with that too because you don't select the pope from a pool that includes women. That pisses me off. So I always have to offer that criticism, but at the same time, I'm grateful if he's pushing back against ethnic cleansing. So please do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I'm grateful that this Pope is doing that, and I'm grateful that it's an American pushing back against that. He is American blood, and
Yeah,
he is one of us, but he
yeah,
also sees us from the outside, and he sees the shit that we're doing. The problem is, I
yeah,
think we actually need a lot more of that.
yeah,
I think we need the churches to really come out and say and push this. If use fire, we don't use fire to fight fire, but we do
yeah,
use the screen of their fire to then come over top them with a big ass helicopter that dumps water on them, which is
yeah.
the
There you go.
Catholic Church and the Christian churches and the Protestant churches all coming out, say in unison and going, Christians are being persecuted in America and being sent to death camps because
Yeah,
they took Christian Americans and sent them to death camps. They're rounding up Christian Americans and sending
you're
them
right.
to death camps. They're rounding up Jewish Americans and sending them to death camps. Do you know
Yes.
how I know this? Because they're rounding up veterans off the street because they
Yeah.
just signed an executive order to take people off the streets and homeless people. You want to know how many people are homeless or who is the majority of homeless people? Veterans,
Yeah.
and
And
they're
this is an
rounding them
example.
up as a group. And that's
Yeah.
the churches should be so loud about that because we're
Yeah.
loud about it when it's, oh, Jewish people are getting rounded up in other countries, or, but we're really quiet about it with
Yeah.
Palestine, where the people in Palestine in Gaza are being genocided.
Yeah.
but we
And
have
this is
no
an
leg to
example.
stand on.
What you're talking about is an example of using their own language, like the language of the oppressors. You turn it back on them, and then their brains break a little bit. And a lot of time they just kind of shake it off and they continue with their evil acts. But every now and then you get through to somebody when you expose just a massive contradiction like that, it gives them pause, and then you're at that kind of opening where you can maybe make some headway with them. But this process of deprogramming people, and that's another thing I've talked about with a lot of people, is we have this expectation, I think, where we can like just say the right words today and have it be fixed today. And it's like, no, it's like I my minor in college was physics. I couldn't in the course of a 20-minute lecture teach you physics, right? I mean, this is a
Hmm.
complicated thing. And it's you have to sit down and actually learning physics is a good example because it helped me get over my indoctrinated or rote memory using my intuition to come up with answers rather than the facts. And it takes you a long time to switch gears where you're like, this is what the math says, so this must be the truth. And we need that too with our perception of, diversity and all these other issues that are going and basic humanity, because we've got all that stuff that's just in our heads. And I don't know if you did you see that that the progressive takes on 20 right wing um political people. Have you seen that debate? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I
So
haven't. I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
and one of the takeaways from that was the people he was debating there, some of them had these just extreme right wing views. One of them openly stated that he was a fascist, but almost all of them, they just had this nervous energy. They were sitting there, and you could just see the internal conflict where I don't think human beings want to be like this, you know? And it's like some part of them know that cognitive dissonance shakes you apart. It creates that just kind of awful. And these people were uncomfortable, and they instantly revert to insults and attacks and hostility because they don't know how to we have to help people process through that, so that they can become they want to be good people,
Yeah.
it's going to take a long time.
Yeah, and it was something I thought of yesterday while I was talking to Tim Fullerton and Frederick Pogue. We were having a discussion on like local actions, and one of the things I asked was about
Oh, there's Wendy.
personality over. Oh, hey, Wendy, welcome. And I'm going to pull you in for the last 20 minutes just because I can. Um, is the difference between attacking a personality versus a personhood. And fascism and bigotry are personality choices. Misogyny and
Yeah.
patriarchy are personality choices. You are
Yeah.
choosing to be an asshole to other people.
Yeah.
I'm going to attack you for that. I'm going to tell you
Yeah.
you're fucking wrong. And we need churches doing it, but we also need our local
Yeah.
friends, just like you said, create that cognitive dissonance just a little bit. You don't attack someone's personality. You don't attack their personhood. You don't tell them
Yeah.
they are bad. You don't tell them
Yeah.
they're the bad person, but you sure as hell can tell somebody their idea is bad right back at them in the way that they
Yeah.
use their words to hurt you, and they don't understand it. They kind of just break. Like you said, they break for a second, and then a couple people will question it. They'll go, "Oh,
Yeah.
ooh, interesting. Maybe I should question more." Hey, Wendy. Good morning.
Hi,
Welcome.
Wendy.
You're late. Late for this important date. You
Uh,
missed the rabbit.
Look, I have trauma. I have trauma.
oh, okay.
Oh,
Well, I hope you're okay.
I hope you're okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I mean, it's like DoorDash trauma.
Oh.
I mean, it goes into graping territory.
Oh.
Craving?
Oh.
Yeah, I basically for an auto repair. Why I said yesterday I did the auto
Your
repair
mic
shop,
changed, Wendy.
and the guy who was taking the delivery told me he liked my butt and he wanted to take me in the back and fuck me.
Oh,
Oh.
And so yeah, I had a little bit more of that this morning, and it was
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah.
You
yeah,
know,
it's
you're not the first person in the last few days who's had something very aggressive happen to them. We actually had talk about protecting your community and doing the actions that
Yeah.
you're supposed to take. And this is what
yeah.
helps build local communities is yes, like we'll take yesterday for myself is we had a young lady who was one of the folks that comes down and does soliciting at the doors to try and get you to do like pest control. Um, And she came to our house, and we have pest control, so we were really nice. And my wife said, "Hey, it's hot. If you need any water, come back at any point. Um, if you need some air conditioning, place to sit down for a couple minutes, come back at any point." And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds fair." Well, she did. She came back later in the afternoon, but it wasn't for water. It was because somebody had verbally assaulted her,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it it was a man who was is probably not it's not the first time this gentleman has
Yeah.
done that. And neighbors got recordings of it on their rings, and they posted it in the neighborhood chat too, and the neighborhood community and the community Facebook pages. And I bring it up because this asshole, literally his family, his daughters, and this is the patriarchy at work.
Yeah.
His daughter answered the door in the or the first time she came around and said her mom would take care of it, but come back in a couple hours. So she did.
Yeah.
And then her daughter again said, but the next time said, "Oh, her dad will be back home in a couple hours." Mom says, "Talk to her or talk to him when he gets home." Well, she does. And she comes back, and he verbally assaults her for trespassing and soliciting
Yeah.
unwanted and unwarranted, and being told that she needed to go away. Stu recorded the whole thing and came over, and we let this poor girl just sit with us for the whole for two
That poor
hours or
thing.
plus. And then she was able to go back out and do more of her job. And then she came back at the end of the day, and we gave her somewhere to sit and charge her phone until she left, until she had to leave, because they leave these people out from like 1 to 9 p.m. Like, they just
Hmm.
drop these kids off or young adults off and just say, "Hey, go walk around this neighborhood
Yeah.
where you're
Yeah.
going to get arrested or assaulted." And it's that patriarch.
Mhm.
And what I figured out was it wasn't that she didn't do anything wrong. She didn't do anything wrong at all. She told, one, she was doing her job. Two, she came back exactly as she should. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't do anything. This dude is part of that patriarchy system and part of that white male dominance, because he
Yeah.
was not going to let his wife or his daughter, his wife, talk to her to make a financial decision. And that's what it came down to. And that's what they even said, was his wife was
Yeah.
not, basically not up to making the financial decision. We need to combat that. And that's the type of
Yeah.
hate that we're trying to break.
Yeah. Absolutely. And they've been so emboldened lately where that kind of talk. It's the world we live in now, and it's just so unfortunate. Unfortunate. So I'm sorry, Wendy, that you had to deal with that today. And yeah,
And that's,
just like
yeah,
that
I'm so
return to
sorry,
basic
Wendy.
decency.
Yeah. And that's all it really is we need to be more decent with each other. We need to remember that community is a communal thing, and democracy is a community sport. Like, if we want to go into like what people, I don't know, I haven't read all of your stuff, and I know you have, and I haven't
Oh,
seen a ton about sports in all your work. Um, but
yeah.
a metaphor for America is we're a sports team, and we have the shittiest players on the field right now, and we need to get them off. And to do that, we need to make ourselves, independent of a party, like we talked about earlier, the best players on the field, because that's what community is about.
With sports too, it's funny because America is always so they always think the only way to do things is through competition, capitalism, competition, you gotta compete, you gotta be the best. And I'm like, if you are on a sports team, you only win if you cooperate with the
Hmm.
fellow members of your team. And you'll say this to people sometimes, and that's another case where their mind will be blown. It's just like you are not gonna win unless you cooperate with your teammates. One 100% true. So cooperation needs to be kind of part of the conversation, elevated just as much as they live together. And that's the other thing. Both of them, they work together in harmony. And that's true of critical thinking and rote memorization too. Those things work together. There's things you do have to memorize before you can even begin to use critical reasoning. So we've got this binary thinking where it always has to be one or the other. And it's like we need to embrace that idea of that a lot of these things kind of come together to form a new whole. Got to go watch The Dark Crystal again, where where the figures at the end are both evil and good, and they live together in harmony. It's like kind of an important lesson for people to learn.
Yeah, like, harmony is important. Wendy, do you want to jump in at all? Or do you just want to hang out and
No,
just chill with us?
You're
And
welcome.
I
you're
just,
welcome to.
what was the question? I was replying to something in your chat.
Oh no,
There
that's
was no
okay. Go
real
ahead.
question. It was more around like the breaking down the patriarchy in terms of breaking down the man, coming
Yeah.
at the man, but doing it in a way that it's like meaningful. It's meaningful change. It's not breaking down the patriarchy to replace it with nothing, because that's what we have to. That's what they're doing. That's what the fundamentalists are doing. They're breaking down systems to not replace them with anything functional. We have to be the alternative that has ideas that are good but are understandable. So, Wendy, I'm going to ask you this question because it's an acronym that I've been floating around and it's been getting some good feedback on. Um, but it's RISE, because it's an action. We can rise as Americans to make America better. So RISE is restoring integrity, service, and ethics in
Well,
politics and the American moral society. And so we rise together by building our communities stronger. We rise together by remembering it's not red versus blue, it's red, white, and blue. Because if you look at the breakdowns of our states, the state who had the largest amount of MAGA voters was California.
mm, mm.
We have to remember that. Like, it's not everywhere. 40% of Arkansas voted,
Yeah,
or 40% of the voters in Arkansas
yeah,
voted blue.
yeah,
So it's not a we're not voting thing. It's not a we're not coming out and we're voting against our own interests. Like, I don't want to ever hear that again. I don't vote against my own
yeah.
interests. I don't have anybody to fucking vote for. So how can I vote against my own interests? So give people to somebody to vote for.
And
I
then, well, and then too. Well, go ahead, Brett, Wendy.
I know. I just, the question being, how do we eliminate the patriarchy? There are cultural and social shifts that happen that cause that, but beyond political engagement, economic leverage. Remember, we're
Yeah,
in the situation with Trump because of economics, because those people, the MAGA people, thought that our economy was going to tank. And they all lobbied behind Shithead because they thought he could save the economy. Um, and so, you know, there's a thing in community building and institutional change, but then, too, political engagement is just not enough. There has to be local, parochial changes
yeah.
that happen. And that's how you defeat the patriarchy. But remember, too, the
Yeah.
patriarchy is like 2,000 fucking years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's older than that, depending. Depending on how you want to think about it.
Yeah.
Okay, Walter, I want to shift topics a little bit. I'll do a bad
Okay.
segue. But I wanted
Okay.
to shift topics a little bit, um, to what you might be working on, and what's going to be coming out from you, here in the future.
Yeah. There's a lot on the ready. I was just checking. I think I've got 99 scheduled articles, so I don't even remember. And yours, it's
Oh,
like
crap.
Well, whenever when I get anxious, I start to write, and it's just like I don't expect anybody to, I don't expect anybody to read everything I write because it's just so much. But a lot of it is just like combating these various narratives, and it's just like something will be just casually stated in the media, and I'm just like, well, there has to be a counter argument to that, and it's like I'll put it out there. I'll quickly do it, zip, and write it and get it out there. I want to write something though about like just the veneer, how it's cracking. I think it's just becoming more and more obvious in the United States that there's this appearance of prosperity, but more and more you're seeing how thin that surface is, and it's getting to the part where people can't. It's just untouchable for the majority of Americans to reach any kind of financial security, have any stability, or even be treated with basic human dignity. You would think we'd get to that moment where it would happen to enough people where we'd be able to bring about change to our country. But I mean, getting back to that voting issue, I always say it's like we gave the Democrats, control of Congress and the presidency in 2020, and it's just our current group of and they're just not acting. They're not doing what they should be doing. They had the power to prevent what we're going through right now. They didn't do it, and they're not listening to people like you and me who grew up in these red rural areas to know what the real, the issues are in those places. I get too many people that, they get their Ivy League degree and they just are dismissive of guys like us. And it's just sort of like, we do know a few things because we've lived through this. And we need to, but then you get so much of that pressure for us to like you have to go along with what they're saying rather than, make constructive criticism. So that's an issue too. So all these things, I guess the work that's upcoming, to get back to your question, is some sort of a new variation of that kind of run of topics.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
there.
I guess in all of that, what do you think is the most impactful thing that, as someone who lives in a rural red area, who experiences it, who grew up in one, what do you think is the most impactful thing we could be doing then?
I gosh, I think well, my biggest thing, I think the thing that would change everything is just an emphasis on education in the United States. The two is that healthcare and education would be one, but it's just the disrespect we're seeing for teachers. I guess maybe it'd be nice. I think it's really important to have educated, especially if you have daughters, make sure they get as much education as possible. They get into positions of power and influence. I think that's a big way to change things. But yeah, just normalizing. I think if we just have our conversations where we normalize being respectful of teachers, being respectful of, instead of like the little narrow window of the things that we're allowed to respect in the United States, you can respect the father, the military, and farmers, and nothing else deserves any kind of respect, right? And it's just like, how
Yeah.
about if we just expand that and thank everybody for their service? Because aren't we all doing a critical job? Without us, without everybody, maybe the whole system fails. Getting back to the sports team analogy, if the guy who's the long snapper doesn't give it to the field goal kicker, he's not going to be able to win the game. So that long snapper is pretty damn important, isn't he? He is as important as the quarterback. And it's just sort of like, I think we can have those conversations with people. We've just kind of conditioned ourselves, and we have to overcome our own conditioning not to have those conversations. But it's like you said, just polite conversations with the people in our sphere. If everybody does that, we encourage that kind of humanity and diversity and just mutual respect. It's gonna be a long time, that's the other thing. Don't think it's gonna happen tomorrow. This is the fight till the end of our lives. Just accept that. And the fight never ends because 'cause we're not going to the other side. But it's gonna take a long time. Don't feel like you're failing if you don't see results today. Sometimes you'll talk to people and they'll go home and think about it. You'll feel like in that moment, if you're pushing to try and get a conversion in that moment, that's a losing game. You're gonna go nuts. Just say the things you have to say respectfully, plant the seed, and a lot of those seeds, they do sprout.
Yeah. And like you said, it takes time. It's a generational change. It's generational work that we're doing. Like, we're doing work that we may not feel the results of. It's what government is best at doing. It's called base research. It's doing the basic things that businesses can't do. So government is civics and action
Yeah.
and returning to, and I'd love to hear. I know we only got a couple. I've got an engagement at the top of just after the top of the hour, so I can't keep us all too long. Um,
Okay.
but you brought up a really cool point on the idea of engagement, and I like the idea in engagement. What do you think of modernizing the language of our founding documents and our founding principles to fit the times? What do you think of that as a way to build and grow civic engagement long term? Because our stuff's pretty outdated.
Oh, you're talking about like just
Like almost
muskets
like
in the country.
a second Bill of Rights, but like the Bill of Rights modernized, the language of
Whoa.
the rights reestablished in a modern way, where
You
things like
know,
bodily autonomy and sovereignty, or data Bill of Rights, or things like that. Wendy, you have a
I should
jump on
point
in.
out that if you read the Federalist Papers, and anybody who wants to understand the Constitution should do this, that Hamilton believed the Bill of Rights was completely unnecessary. And if he had gotten his way, we would not have any of this
yeah.
2A, 1A bullshit.
There is theoretically a mechanism for that, and it's supposed to be the Supreme Court. They're supposed to be the ones that over time, through their decisions, that's the unenumerated rights. The Bill of Rights gives us the right unenumerated rights that aren't specifically listed in the Bill of Rights. And that comes out, and a lot of people don't even know what those are. So, and it's like you got the patriots on the they call themselves the patriots on the right who are cheering
The
when our
Patriots.
unenumerated rights are being taken away. The what?
The fake Triots?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
Patriots.
and and they're stripping us of all these rights that have come through these Supreme Court decisions. Somebody knew. I mean, you got this ongoing uh strategy to corrupt the Supreme Court, which has been very effective. Because this, what was the thing I saw the other day said, of the cases against this administration, 94% of the decisions of lower courts have gone against this administration. But when it comes to the Supreme Court, 94% go for this administration. So we got a real problem there. I mean, the mechanism is in the Constitution to update our rights because they can't anticipate things, and they knew there's nothing in the Constitution about data privacy because there was no
Hmm.
such thing as that. But yeah, we're at a state where all that's terribly eroded. There has to be major reform, you know. But I mean, if we could just get to the bottom of the corruption that exists, it seems like the level of corruption is so high. We'll see. I mean, that's just the ongoing anxiety of our time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Um, but I think we have to have something. I think we have to have something that brings,
Yeah,
because if the Supreme Court isn't going to do it, and if the
yeah,
president isn't going to do it, and if Congress isn't going to do it, the highest ranking individuals in our country are citizens. Citizens need to step up and do the base duty that you're supposed to be, which is vote. Like that's the basics. That's like
yeah,
step one
yeah,
is vote to be a citizen. That's literally the only thing we were asked to do by the founders is to vote. I think we need to make that I think we need to make it more. I think part of being a citizen needs to be
yeah,
remembering what you have to do for your own democracy because we're really comfortable
yeah.
that we have one, but
You're
nobody knows
right.
what it means.
I think overcoming that idea that we shouldn't talk about religion or politics, that long-standing statement, throw that out the window, because religion and politics is coming into your house and arresting you and sending you to a concentration camp right now. So I think we do need to talk about those things. And we just have to kind of push through that kind of we can't be permit people to live in delusion. They're pretending they're live in denial about what's going on right now. When I say to people, it's like we have to stop the hate crimes against immigrants, and people don't even know what you're talking about. And it's just like it's been hate crime against immigrants, and it goes along with the hate crimes against the black community and the LGBTQ plus community. These hate crimes are ongoing. And getting back to what we started at the beginning, it's like a nation is not an exceptional nation if it permits its citizens to be rounded up and murdered, which is what's happening.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm glad you brought it back to the exceptionalism piece too, right there, because I think they've warped exceptionalism into what you've talked about is power and control. But it's the American dream, and it's the promise to live up to all men and women and others. And that's one of the things I'm talking about of we need to update the language of the Constitution to be all people are
Yeah.
created equal, not
Oh,
just all
that's good.
men.
Yeah.
All people are created equal, and all people have the
Yeah.
right to unalienable those unalienable and innumerable rights and sovereignty and just simple changes to not even they don't even have to be permanent right now because they can't be,
Yeah.
but it would be
Yeah.
the idea of understanding as a citizen that it's our duty to update it to the time. Thomas Jefferson said every 19 years you should redo the Constitution because laws are meant for they're natural laws of the living generation, and we should get back to
Yeah.
the idea of our laws should also match in vernacular the living generation.
Absolutely. I think so. Yeah.
Okay, we're
Yeah.
at the
There's a
top of
lot.
the hour, and I can't stay too long. I wish we could because I love this conversation.
Yeah.
Um,
I love it.
I
We'll
want,
do it again.
yeah, I want to give quick props to Walter. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's been an amazing conversation. If you have not subscribed already, please do to Walter. He's an
Thank you.
incredible
Appreciate that.
writer. He does notes. He's mastered the notes. It's notes a day, keep the fascists away. And it's that for a reason. Um, And so, thanks everybody for joining today. I'm Nick. Wendy's down on the bottom, at least on my screen. We've got Walter with us today. Please subscribe to everybody. And like I say at the end of all the shows now, is let's stop being sick of this shit and let's start doing this shit. Have a good one,
Absolutely.
everyone.
Thanks. See you, Wendy. Nice to see you.
Always a pleasure, Walter.
Thank you.
Same for you, Nate.
Thanks, Wendy. You too. Thanks, Walter. Have a great one, all.
Thank you. Thank you.